I'm really thrilled about today's session to start us off this morning. So in the planning for our conference overall, we wanted to give folks really a practical sense of how to make the issues that impact people in terms of poverty and financial empowerment, et cetera, make them both deepen our understanding of those issues, but also make them relevant and give us tools to talk about those issues with political figures and candidates. So immediately as we started brainstorming about possible speakers that could really help us understand this better, I knew immediately, I thought of Tishaura Jones. She is both a thought leader in thinking about wealth building. As a city administrator, she's the treasurer of St. Louis, which is great. We got some St. Louis in the back. And she started their Office of Financial Literacy, but she's also been a candidate. So she also knows these issues from that perspective and was as watching from afar, having heard her speak at other conferences around like asset building, wealth inequality, racial wealth divide issues. It was incredibly exciting to see the momentum of her campaign. And the issues that she was raising, and just kind of part of a new wave of strong women of color kind of being up front in political spaces. So I'm really thrilled, Tishaura, that you could join us, and extra props for her because her flight got canceled, so she had extra travel logistics, but still made it here a little later than we'd hoped. But so with that, again, we're due for an exciting conversation. How this will work is Tishaura will come make some keynote remarks, and then we'll have an opportunity for question and answers. So prepare to learn a lot and get inspired. And with that, I welcome Treasurer Jones to the stage.
Good morning. Oh, I made it. Yeah, I spent, 7 hours in my home airport yesterday. Flight got canceled, then rebooked. Shout out to John, who was my ace yesterday to make sure that I got rebooked and got here in enough time just to sleep, shower, and put my face on and be in front of you today. So there are a few things you should know about me. I'm a daddy's girl after being a mama's girl for 29 years. I never wanted to be a politician. I'm unapologetically black, and sometimes I'm petty. And I'm the single mom to the most adorable 10-year-old son. And check out his adventures at #StuffAidenSays, and that's ADEN. All of these experiences shape who I am. I didn't know we weren't rich. My mother worked hard to stretch dollars or meals from week to week, and she and her sisters and brothers raised me and my cousins and kind of kept all of that from us. Some might call that the village mentality. And like most people, I learned my financial habits from my parents. My mother took me to the bank with her every 2 weeks to deposit her and my dad's paychecks. My father taught me the importance of saving and investing. And both taught me that it's about retail therapy and the value of retail therapy and how it's okay to splurge on something for yourself just once in a while. Things got a little better by the time I got to high school. My dad got a better job. We moved into a better house. I got accepted to college, but we were definitely on a payment plan. Also, I went to Hampton University. College was much more reasonable in the 90s than it is today. I just took a quick calculation and looked at how much I would have to save per month to afford to send my son there. Just starting today, and I'd have to save $1,000 a month for the next 8 years in order to afford to send my son to Hampton at today's prices. which is crazy. Right after graduation, however, my world fell apart. My father was sent to federal prison for income tax evasion. I started a business that failed, and I moved back home with my mother to help her financially. Then she was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and shortly thereafter died. And as an only child, I only had one option, because I was an adult with bills of my own, and that was to file bankruptcy. It took 10 years to recover financially. It was hard, but I survived. After a brief career in the state legislature, I was convinced to run for treasurer. Now, the treasurer of the city of St. Louis is the most unique elected official you'll ever meet. Not only am I the city's chief cash management and investment officer, I am also the city's parking supervisor. So, every parking meter, every parking enforcement officer, every parking ticket, several garages and surface lots are all under my supervision. But I decided to use my power for good and not evil. When I ran for this office, I looked around the country to see what other treasurers did. Simple, right? An internet search led me to the treasurer of San Francisco, Jose Cisneros, and the then treasurer of Chicago, Stephanie Neely. I learned that they leveraged the power of being the city's chief banking officer to convince banks to invest CRA dollars in low-income communities, create bank accounts that didn't penalize people for using them, and help decrease the number of unbanked and underbanked families. And as I looked at my own life and the lessons that I didn't learn about financial literacy along the way, especially the decision related to filing bankruptcy, I decided that this would be the new clarion call of the treasurer's office. I wanted to help people either prevent making the same mistakes I did or help them find a path back to financial stability after hardships. And after I was elected, I created the city's first Office of Financial Empowerment, which is funded by residual parking funds. So every time you feed a meter, every time you pay a parking ticket in the city of St. Louis, you are helping our families with financial literacy and empowerment. So I implore all of you to come to St. Louis. Come on to St. Louis and let your parking tickets triple. But most importantly, in the Office of Financial Empowerment is the College Kids Children's Savings Account Program, which since 2015 has opened over 10,000 college savings accounts for every child entering kindergarten in a public school in the city of St. Louis. And we loaded with the first $50. Now, many of you know what CSAs are. They come in many shapes and many forms: college savings account, child savings account, college development account, or child development account. And it's an account in the child's name that allows families to save for post-secondary expenses. And some of you may ask, why $50? That's nothing. But you tell a kindergartner that you gave them $50 and their eyes light up and they think they're rich, right? But studies say it's not the account, it's the presence of the account that makes the difference in a child's life. And more specifically, studies say that children with less than $500 saved for college are 3 times more likely to go to college and 4 times more likely to complete college than children without savings. Some of you may ask, what prompted you to start this program? One, I was following the lead of one of my mentors in the field, Jose Cisneros, the treasurer of San Francisco. His kindergarten to college program is in its 7th year. And as a Black woman in politics, I lead from a different place. I try to solve for the problems of Black mothers like myself, because I truly believe when you solve for the problems of Black women or mothers of color, you solve everybody's problems. But lastly and most importantly, the death of Mike Brown prompted me to start this program. In May 2014, I started meeting with local leaders about the possibility of starting a municipal savings program, and 5 months later, Mike Brown was murdered and Ferguson burned. And in the months after, the Ferguson Commission released its report, and one of the core recommendations was the establishment of CSAs. And that made my mission much more urgent because CSAs give children hope where it doesn't exist. You see, justice isn't solely about the police not shooting Mike Brown and leaving his dead body in the street for over 5 hours. Justice requires us to ask what Mike Brown's life would be like if he were still alive today. You see, in St. Louis, there's an 18-year gap in life expectancy between people living in affluent zip codes and those living in poor majority black zip codes. We hear about violence on the news every day, but what we don't hear about are the people who are hard at work to address the root causes of violence: poverty, food deserts, poor transportation, low wages, polluted air, and a lack of hope that silently kills far too many people in our community. And in March of 2017, I ran for mayor of the city I love, St. Louis, right? I came extremely close to winning. Only 888 votes and a crowded field of black male candidates stood in the way, 4 to be exact. While it hurt to lose, I did what most black women do. I reflected, prayed, dusted my shoulders off, got back up and went back to work because I was still treasurer and there was still work to do. During that campaign, I took a stand against the status quo and put racial equity and poverty at the center of my campaign. Our newspaper's local editorial board said that they were going to endorse a candidate that was going to address the blight and graffiti that was killing St. Louis. And I called that bullshit. Blight and graffiti isn't killing St. Louis or any urban city. What's killing St. Louis is a systemic racism that pervades almost every public and private institution and makes it nearly impossible for black, brown, or poor people to get better or safer or healthier or better educated. I talked unapologetically about how St. Louis needs to change, and it still does. And I wasn't talking about polite incremental change, real change, change that's hard, change that hurts, change that requires you to roll up your sleeves and get dirty doing the real work that matters, like the work you're doing here. I ran on looking at every issue through a racial equity lens, asking if every decision we made helps those who have been disenfranchised, redlined, and flat out ignored for way too long. I ran on looking through each and every program in city government and making the changes necessary to ensure that government is working for the people who need it the most. I proposed participatory budgeting to modernizing of services, taking steps to make city government easier to navigate, easier to participate in, and easier to understand. I proposed asking police officers and firefighters what would make their job easier, shy of more of each, and changing the culture of those institutions. I proposed putting social workers in police departments so that trained practitioners would be able to do the jobs that police often aren't trained to do. And guess what? None of what I proposed was rocket science or new. There are programs all across the country that we can learn from, that we can adopt. And I know this because I've traveled to see them. And the response from my local paper and some in local government, a writer at the local paper said that I was high flying and I should be grounded. I suspect that she meant I was uppity or had a bad attitude, but she didn't have the honesty or courage to be that overt. Fake news, right. And it's the same way I've run the treasurer's office. When I was elected, I found an office that did a lot of things inefficiently, and I looked for ideas on how to improve it. And over the past 6 years now, I've modernized parking, launched a major effort in the Office of Financial Empowerment to change lives practically for people in St. Louis. Also in St. Louis, we're having a big debate about the use of tax incentives for new development. I'm not against the use of tax incentives for development, but I want to make sure that we're using those incentives for blighted areas as intended, and that we're coupling those incentives with community benefit agreements. Community benefit agreements can make sure that there's a priority for those who are living in the area to get to the jobs created by the development, and that these jobs are living wage jobs, and that they lead to real investment in the community. And for decades, St. Louis has jumped around, investing here and there, giving tax breaks here and there, without any real reason or where they give them out. And as a result, the subsidy has often gone to the parts of the city that need it the least. And I proposed a comprehensive plan for the entire city, one that recognizes that more needs to be outside of the wealthy, overdeveloped neighborhoods. In St. Louis, we have 2 jails. One of them, the Workhouse, was built in the mid-1960s and has been repeatedly reported as a place unfit for humans. All but a few of the more than 800 inmates are awaiting trial because they don't have money for bail. I propose closing that rat hole of a prison, and because taxpayers spend millions of dollars a year to keep that place open to accommodate many people who don't need to be there or be there so often. And I propose using the savings on mental health services, substance abuse centers, reentry programs, job training, and working with the rest of the region to ensure that they're doing their fair share about homelessness instead of just dropping people in downtown St. Louis. And public transportation is an issue in St. Louis as well. Too many people have a hard time getting to centers of employment and recreation because we don't have transportation options that work for them. And as treasurer, I invested $2 million into updating our transit study so we could get back in the pipeline for federal funding, and propose making a larger investment in transit a priority. And of course, because I'm the treasurer, I propose protecting our most vulnerable citizens by expanding access to responsible banking and credit, by insisting on a minimum wage that's a livable wage, and by instituting paid family leave policies. I also propose creating a tenant's bill of rights so that renters across our city have the tools they need to ensure their housing is livable and safe. Because we need to do all that we can as a city to make sure we're laying a foundation that allows citizens not just to survive, but to thrive. And most of the proposals that I talked about are what I call delayed gratification strategies. They're long games that require patience, something a lot of us don't have. When we're dealing with government or each other, we want an instant response to our problem or inquiry. We want that pothole fixed now. We want somebody to respond to us right now. What? I texted you and you didn't text me back? What? We didn't get here overnight. Therefore, our solutions won't be overnight. But it takes time to build things. Foundations take time to set. And it's like Aesop's fable of the tortoise and the hare. And what was the lesson at the end? Slow and steady sometimes beats fast and flashy. And my advice for you, to be steadfast in your commitment to ending poverty. Don't reinvent the wheel. See what works elsewhere. Adapt it for your environment and let it roll. Be authentic and be yourselves every day, because there are enough fake people in the world, so don't be one of them. Thank you and God bless.